Okay, so I'll call the regular October meeting of the Executive Finance Committee to order at 8:32. I'll verify that certification of open meeting law requirements have been met. Okay, you see an 18-item agenda in front of you.
Move to approve.
Move to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the agenda. We may be doing some juggling as far as the order of the agenda. Some people were not aware that it was an 8:30 meeting. So all those in favor of adopting the agenda signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. I suppose we'll give public comment a few minutes. Anybody that is watching this.
Was that the
Oh, excuse me, adoption of the previous minutes. Excuse
I'll
me
make a
about.
move to adopt.
Okay, motion to approve the minutes of the previous meeting on September, and we have a second. Does anybody see any corrections or changes that need to be made to that? Okay, hearing none, all those in favor of adopting the minutes of the September 7th meeting signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Now we'll go to the public comment. Anyone that is watching this live and you'd like to make a public comment, the number is 715-538-1770. We'll give you a couple of minutes, and if you don't get in that time, just feel free to call and we'll adjust the time a little bit. How long should we wait?
Where's the phone?
Just do public.
There's a phone behind the,
Oh, behind there?
yeah.
Okay. That'll be the one that rings.
Get that, it's hard to see that sucker. I mean, you can't see who's on it.
This TV screen isn't the best. That one can tell us a lot better. He had to get this one low enough so that these people didn't get covered up.
Are we rearranging again, kind of like the way we were before for social distancing again? Because of the courthouse rules and that?
Has the COVID committee said anything?
Not as far as rearranging the room, but we did send out an update on Friday.
Oh,
I did not read it, I saw it, but that's really, it paints my slide.
Any employee receiving compensation
That
would
is your-
fall,
Obviously,
any employee receiving compensation would fall underneath that policy. So elected officials would be within that.
Well, I think we'll move on. Paul, would you like to give us our county sales tax update?
okay, our September distribution was 238, it's on. Our September distribution was $238,236.95. If you compare that to last year at $219 and the year before $161, it's up. So we're at $1.458 million collected so far this year. Well ahead of last year, where we were over 200,000 over budget. So I mean, we're way ahead of. I shouldn't say it, and I jinxed it, right? We're way ahead of schedule. So
Okay, any questions for Paul on the sales tax? Okay, general fund?
and there has not been any change. We haven't done anything at county board, so we're still at the $3.3 million in the general fund. I didn't change the dates. I should have done that, but it should have been, instead of August 2nd, it should have been October 4th.
Okay,
And that's it for that.
okay.
And guess who's next?
Brian, you ready to go?
I am.
Here, if you want to move up to one of the mics so anybody watching can hear you.
Which one you going to? I'm going to turn your...
You can just, you tell me.
I'll turn this one on. There you go.
Yeah, we did, I don't know, you weren't notified, Brian, that we did start at 8:30.
They changed it while I was gone.
All
That's
time,
why
I
you're
just,
up right away.
I just get here as soon as I can and.
Yeah,
you're
we
early
told
tonight, but-
we told them that, but you were planning on 9 o'clock, but
I just took your chair. You can bring.
There's another, no, you're good. You're good. All right. I'm assuming this is working. It's red?
Yeah.
All right, great. Good morning. Understanding is that committee wanted to have at least a preliminary discussion on the potential for financing approximately $5 million in road and bridge projects for fiscal '22. Certainly, timing-wise, you have the ability to proceed with something like that and have a borrowing close in sufficient time to be able to levy for the dollars if you'd like this year and collect the revenue associated with the debt repayment in '22. You do have some options as well. That is not the only path that you can travel. We did some preliminary numbers, just kind of where you're at from a levy perspective. As you can infer, you're pretty flat, right, from a debt service perspective, given the recent Justice Center project. So that is the case for some period of time. Instead of the typical rather short final maturity that we had been running the last few years, and that was on purpose, so that we could maintain a debt profile where the total amount of debt service payable from the tax levy was falling precipitously after 2 to 3 years. That was done on purpose from a structure perspective so that we had the ability to put the Justice Center in play without a corresponding levy impact, or to be roughly net neutral. And in fact, your mill rate with an increase in value is pretty flat going into next year, just for debt service, right? So everything else is outside of that. So at this point, you're fairly flat, which was anticipated, and that was the plan. So anything additional is a marginal increase in the levy then going forward. So instead of running things very short, we ran it on a 10-year schedule here initially, and that's somewhere in the neighborhood of $500,000 plus a year. As you can imagine, $500,000 over 10 years plus some interest is about $550,000 and change in year on an estimated basis. So that's a nominal impact to the tax rate. So that's basically tens of cents on the dollar. It's not a tremendous increase from a tax rate perspective. It certainly would cause the levy to go up. There is no doubt about that. So you do have some options, and I would say from a calendar perspective, what you want to consider is probably more closing than anything else. So getting in the weeds a little bit here from a tax-exempt debt perspective, every calendar year, every governmental jurisdiction is afforded what's called a bank-qualified allocation. And again, without getting too much into what that means, your allocation every year from the federal government's perspective is $10 million. And if you issue $10 million or less of tax-exempt debt in a calendar period, you can designate those as bank-qualified obligations. So again, setting aside what that truly means from the parties that own it, generally speaking, you're getting a better interest rate on bank-qualified debt versus non-bank qualified debt. Clearly, for calendar year 2021, we are in excess of the $10 million. And in fact, the $43 million Justice Center project was financed on a non-bank qualified basis, which is perfectly fine, and that was the plan. We could have staggered that potentially over a number of years to try to get better rates, but the spread between bank qualified and non-bank qualified isn't huge right now. It depends on the term of the debt you're issuing. We would estimate that for a 10-year issue, it's about 0.15 to 0.2%. In terms of if you issued bank qualified, you'd do that much better than non-bank qualified. And so you've exceeded the limitation for this year. You reset the clock, right? You reset the game here on Jan 1 of next year. You are afforded another $10 million bank qualified allocation. All right, so it is possible to proceed and put things in place in a way such that you could approve the financing in this calendar year and close in January of next year. And that would put you in a position to be able to avail yourself of bank qualified debt but continue. You could also say, all right, well, we could just go into next year and still get proceeds in time sufficient to do your projects in 22. But if from a budget perspective, if you feel more comfortable and confident in establishing a capital budget that includes the proceeds of borrowing, you could align those things in a way and sell the debt in, basically lock into rates and terms in December, but close in January. And then we could have a bank qualified transaction, which would come at slightly lower rates than what is otherwise available on a non-bank qualified basis. All right, so we ran our estimates on a bank qualified basis, but we also added 15 to 20 basis points or 0.15 to 0.2% over current market rates. So in effect, we're approximating if we were to sell today, what a non-bank qualified transaction would be. So without knowing for certain what other needs you might have in fiscal 22, right? So borrow in 22 for anything else, that would seem to be a reasonable approach. It's a reasonable expectations analysis. So if you have really no other intent to be borrowing in 22, I mean, that's how the attorneys are going to look at it, the ones that are providing the opinions on the tax side. So if you have a reasonable expectation that you will be less than 10 million in 22, then you have no problem with bank qualified status. So maybe I'll pause there and see if there are any questions.
Is this something you figure we should do on an annual basis?
Say that again?
Is this something you figure we should be doing on an annual basis?
Well, in talking with Paul, I mean, I think we're getting close to the end of the original ask on the road and bridge replacement program, but I don't know where we stand with that specifically.
I was gonna say, I think it was, last year's was the fourth year, they had a four-year plan. And I think last year's was the last one, but then they put in the budget this year, and actually put it in as a levy item rather than as a borrowing item, which puts us way over what our levy limit
Yeah,
allows us.
that's the tough part of levy limits, of course, right?
Yes.
Go ahead, Tim.
Earlier, Brian, you mentioned that this borrowing, if we did it, would affect the levy, or would affect the levy. We haven't finalized the budget yet. What other factors would influence the levy besides the highway? What other potential factors?
Sure. So maybe that's a good place to speak to from a calendar perspective. If you closed in calendar year 22, we would actually have no levy impact in 22. So we'd shift forward a year. So unless you wanted to, if you said, we want to recommend to the board that we get this both issued and closed, like done in this calendar year, which would then give you the authority to levy against the debt and put it on the rolls for payable 22. If we shifted a little into 22, right, and availed ourselves of bank qualified debt, I would recommend that you have no true payment from a levy perspective until 23. So levy 22, collect 23. Investors may say, that's a long time for us I'm going to buy that bond, but then you're not going to pay me any interest until, say, mid-23. We can actually have an interest payment due in 22, but we would borrow for it. It's called capitalized interest. And so that would probably satisfy investors and it would have no demonstrable impact. So it would gross up the borrowing a little bit, but you're talking a very small amount in terms of what the payment requirement would be associated with that. And so you would have no payment in 22 and we would just shift forward a year. So we'd have 10 years of payments starting in 23 from your perspective on what you have to levy for. So I would start with that to say, if we kind of shift the calendar and try to get bank qualified status, then we would also structure the debt so that you would have no real net payment impact until fiscal 23. As far as anything else that would affect the levy, I'm not intimate with every detail of your budget, and I don't know where you landed on a net new construction component, Paul, but there are only a handful of adjustments available.
I wanted to say maybe a 1.5.
Yeah, there are only a handful of actual adjustments available to allow you something more than The adjustment for net new construction and tax increment district closures throughout the county would impact you as well, as far as what you can gross up your levy on a permanent basis. Beyond that, it's more like transfers of services, things of that nature, consolidation of services amongst jurisdictions. So, yeah, there's not much that you can adjust for other than debt service.
All right, and the second question, we just spoke with the highway commissioner last Friday, and he's pushing for a longer-term commitment from the board. So, John, correct me if, I mean, that's the impression I got. He wants not just $5 million this year, but a commitment to say, $5 million for the X amount of years going into the future. How does that, can you comment on that? How would that affect the law?
We can model something like that. The difficult thing for it's not just the county, it's any jurisdiction under levy limits, right? If there is that sort of ask in the context of your overall budget, you really need more of a long-term financial focus on what can we pay for out of the general levy, right? Not just borrowing and levying taxes annually to service the debt, because now you've got competing interest with a finite resource being your total amount of levy other than just debt service, right? So think about your tax levy, and it goes as a revenue stream is getting dropped into buckets. One of those buckets is debt service. And so if you set that one aside and just focus on operating and capital, now you've got a finite resource, because only debt service can be levied at an unlimited amount by rate or dollar. So now you've got this bucket of money for operations and capital outlay. And so what in there from a looking forward perspective, how could you potentially build in enough to accomplish that and try to minimize the borrowing aspect? You probably would still have to borrow to some degree, but that's a tougher discussion, because we'd have to engage in some level of long-term forecasting to be able to give you some, based on certain assumptions, that would give you some comfort that you could start to implement a dollar levy from the limited bucket associated with roads and bridges over and above what you might be right now. That one's harder.
Okay, so I noticed I was really paying attention.
Yes,
Okay.
sure.
And I'm not sure I understood that answer, despite the fact that I was paying 105% attention. But wait a minute, but I'm going to try to paraphrase it. And this is how I hear your response, that if we made let's say we made a 10-year commitment to spend $5 million a year on highway funds, or highway and bridge and road construction, that $5 million commitment would be, for those 10 years, a constraint on the budget. That would be plugged into the budget. We would have to pay that. And it would, therefore, it would affect everything else we do with the budget. Is that correct?
Potentially. This board cannot bind, right, any future boards to that commitment.
Okay.
Right? Every year that would need to be put into the budget. You make your decisions just like you would any other year.
So we can't do it anyway. I mean, this board can't do it.
No board can ever, right? I mean, there's no way for one board to bind the next, other than for a handful of things, one of which being something like debt. So when you issue debt, no future board can revoke the levy associated with debt. You must, by law, levy for the debt. But just making a decision on a capital plan, every year you have to do the budget, and whether or not you end up with the same plan is really up to that board at that time. So there will be a number of different ways to do what you've described, one of which is looking for resources within your budget and how do you allocate it appropriately. And certainly there is always, at least under current law, the ability to levy for debt service whatever you feel is appropriate as a board. And so you are not the only county or other local unit of government who has determined that the path of least resistance with capital outlay is to put a plan in place that largely utilizes the issuance of debt to fund capital costs, because the levy associated with debt is not constrained under levy limits. You can levy an unlimited amount for debt service. And so having a cogent plan that puts you on a trajectory that you're comfortable with debt is a big component to capital plans, and much of which many counties have been looking at, certainly the ones that we have been looking at. And so when you do kind of as we had discussed, when you do that legacy, that generational project in terms of some type of a facility, you do get flat, and it's very hard to not, it's almost impossible to not wind up in that position when you do something like that, because you're constrained by the 20 years of debt service under law for any general obligation debt. And so now, trying to find a path where you feel comfortable that you're not just kind of adding on, because you need a corresponding valuation increase to go with that to stay neutral with the tax rate. That's kind of the rub of trying to look forward in time and getting comfortable with how things stand. And you could amortize debt longer than 10 years for roads and bridges. That is certainly in your, it's allowable under law to do that. But understand that you would have other needs. That was our initial look, was just to do it over 10 years. So that you would have the opportunity to potentially back end that at some point too, and try to build up more of a long-term program. If you wanted to do something more regular, we could certainly look at a longer term on the debt, and that becomes a bond issue rather than a note issue, and the authorizations associated with that are slightly different. So we could look at a couple options in that regard if you'd like to see what those impacts are, because what we've run so far is really just a 10-year issue, and that equates to a higher annual payment. You could do it over a longer period of time, and that would not be unreasonable given the useful life of a completed road is certainly typically longer than 10 years.
Okay, thank you. I have no more questions.
But
Okay.
in reality, this, like you said, the first time was borrow, like the bank note or whatever, first, after we went up, so we take the funds like January 22, or whatever it was, that would probably be the easiest and cheapest interest rate.
I think so. You're talking the difference of maybe a few weeks in terms of when you would sell the debt, right? Because you really want to be somewhere in 30 to 35 days from the day of sale. So when we've typically come to the board and said, here's the proposal that you can act on, it's binding once the board takes action, and then we close a few weeks later. If you extend that too far, that becomes kind of a very non-traditional transaction. So you want to be at about 30 to 35 days. So if we're looking into January for closing, early December is about as early as you could sell the debt. And frankly, we want to be behind the Thanksgiving holiday anyways, because there's many people that are gone. So now we're looking at early December, which is perfectly fine. Close in January, and then really for you, you won't have an actual payment impact as far as the levy goes until levy 22, collect 23.
So you are recommending that, or not recommending, you say that this would be a acceptable plan?
Certainly. I mean, there's nothing inherently, this doesn't require extensive analysis. When you want to contemplate a broader spectrum capital plan, then perhaps we do want to visit one more time and just look at the range of outcomes associated with something like a 10-year issue, maybe 15-year, maybe 20-year. What does that mean to you from a levy perspective? Because if you're going to have to come back to the well for a number of years, the shorter the debt, the more the impact is going to be. You're paying less in interest, there's no doubt, the shorter the term of the debt, but the annual repayment requirements by definition have to be higher to fully retire the debt in that shorter period of time. So if your perspective is we're likely to continue this for the foreseeable future, perhaps you want to look at some longer term repayment requirements, which would then kind of ease the burden, so to speak, and allow you to take on additional debt without a higher corresponding impact.
Okay.
So certainly you've got ample borrowing capacity. That has never really been a challenge. Even with the last issue that was done for the Justice Center project, you still have something like half or more available to you. So then it becomes reviewing the levy impact and what your level of comfort is as a governing body.
I think we'd like to keep the levy stable, isn't that a goal
Right,
of
that's the
ours?
goal.
Very much.
Can't borrow a lot
That's
of
what
money
we
and keep the
promised.
levy stable.
Yes, and I think people are agreeable to things if we don't have to raise the levy.
Right.
Okay, anything else for Brian? Well, we may have more questions when push comes to shove at the end, but
I suspect you're meeting fairly regularly as a group here leading through the budget, and so, the numbers aspect is easy enough to run scenarios, and would be happy to visit with you again as soon as you'd like, understanding that a calendar would have to be crafted at some point, and, it takes about 30 or more days to kind of get prepped for an actual debt issue. So you can just let me know when you want to visit again, meet again on the topic, and we can kind of put in front of you some impact scenario analysis, which is useful to have this discussion because now I have a better direction on, I think, what we would need to do in terms of putting things in front of you from a decision-making perspective that would put us in a position to inform others, including the bond attorney, what would need to be done at a potential board meeting to get proper authorization in place as well, and set an actual calendar.
so just to summarize, the two options, are we just gonna borrow the 5 million each year or make a long-term commitment
Well,
to several years down the road?
I think the budget perspective, from what I was talking about, where you have your operating and capital budget, there's an extensive exercise associated with that to look forward in time, say 3, 5, 7, 10 years, and all of that is doable. And is a lot more sausage making in terms of the back and forth associated with that and what is reasonable from assumptions. The debt and capital side, it's really a matter of how long do you want, say, this initial issue to be. We can map in $5 million a year very easily. I mean, that's not hard. So then you have to then decide what you want from an overall structure perspective, and the levy by its nature will have an impact. We like to look at tax rate because that's just, you can manage, even if the levy goes up, sometimes if you have increases in tax base, the rate might stay roughly the same or have nominal impact. So I would want to show you then, here's what $5 million looks like at 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, and then here's another, say, 3 to 5 years of doing that, and this was what it would look like, so that I can gauge your reaction, and as a result of that, we can potentially structure the debt in a way that might minimize. You might pay additional interest costs in doing some of the things that we would describe, but then also the levy impact might be mitigated to some degree too. So I just want to give you a sense of what those things look like, so that you have a solid understanding of what the impacts would be over a number of years of making decisions around borrowing for capital costs.
And you're comfortable with what we may have in mind right now?
Yeah, I have no discomfort at all. The conversations you're having are really no different than many of our county clients. You'll just need to give some feedback on what you would want to see over a multi-year period. So, but there's nothing inherently, nothing causes me any concern, I can tell you that. So.
Go ahead, Doc.
Just one question for the group here. Do we want to even ask, I would have to assume we don't, about the building project out the highway? I know Al asked us if
That's
we.
right, another thing, yes.
What's your feeling there, Tim? Do
I think
We
that-
shouldn't-
I
we
don't-
shouldn't
I
think
it's
about that?
off the table.
take it off the table? Okay. We're talking about some building out at the highway.
That's I understand.
as far as I'm concerned.
Okay. Okay, anything else for Brian?
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, and we'll let you know when we need you again.
Very good. Thank you all.
Thank you, Ryan. Thanks for showing up in person. I appreciate it greatly,
You're
instead of
welcome.
talking to that thing.
The committee is meeting yet this week on budgets.
Okay.
Our hoping-
We
Close to
Hopefully be done by Friday.
hope
yeah.
to be finished this week, yep.
So you hear from,
I don't think so.
You don't?
A long way to
or
go.
maybe early next week, we better say that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you all.
Thanks, Brian.
Okay, is there anything we want to move up, because with the closed session, that may take a little while, or? I thought I saw Ann,
Did you see it?
she walked that way.
Mine's really, really short.
Well, you're gonna be here the whole time anyway, but I was talking about Ann maybe instead.
See if Ann's out there.
She did walk by that way, and I didn't see her walk back, so
Don't have the amended.
we could move her up so she wouldn't have to sit here or sit and wait for us.
Did you say?
That way, I thought I saw her walk that way.
She
No?
might be in the studio.
Well, she knows it's today.
Yep. No? Okay, well.
Let's just go to
we'll-
closed session, be done with it.
Yep, well, let's go with the closed session then, so. Anybody want to make the
Make a
motion?
motion, we go into closed session per Wisconsin State Statute 19.85, parentheses 1, parentheses C, to update the committee to consider employment, promotion, compensation, and performance evaluation data regarding the Human Services Department.
Second.
Okay, we have a second to that motion. John Austin?
Yes.
Yes.
Doc? Tim?
Yes.
And let's see, myself, yeah, we're missing one. And I say yes too. Okay, so now we'll take care of action on items discussed in closed session. Go ahead, Tim.
Yep. The motion I'm going to make pertains to the principal discussion of the closed session. And my motion is to approve the payment of a bill for services provided by Attorney Mindy Dale. The bill starts in August and will go in, the motion would be to pay the bill until her services are completed, starting in August. A little more garbled than it was the first time.
I'll second that.
Okay, motion and a second. Is there any discussion regarding that issue? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Okay, how do we want to deal? Who wants to explain the next part?
Well, the other one was, there's a bill still, it's actually a bill from 2020 that didn't get paid out to the healthcare center. So to get it to the full county board vote, I'd like to make a motion that we take it out of general fund just to get the bill.
That's not specific on the agenda, so we won't make that motion.
Okay.
No, you want to refer to the full county.
But refer it to the full county board, because this committee already voted at it at a previous meeting to pay it, so.
The Human Services Board this month was gonna bring forward resolutions recommended by Mr. Niemeyer and Mr. Severson, so that's being posted today, should that not be on there?
Well, that would be the way, but just delays it a little longer. If,
Oh, then it would be on this coming month's county board? Or no, we'd have to approve that resolution first, wouldn't we? We're trying to speed things up a little bit.
I'm just doing what Mr. Niemeyer asked me to
That was previous discussion before any
Mhm.
discussion we've had here about that process.
So we are okay with just sending it to the county board without them even
acting on it.
acting on it?
Because you've already acted on it.
Because we've acted on it. We told it's going to be paid.
But, and the Human Services will act on it, what, Tuesday? Is that the next Human Services meeting? Monday?
But
Well,
if
Monday
they
is
did-
today.
If they did it I was told we had to create a resolution, and so, I was gonna bring the resolution on Monday to the Human Services Board, which will come to you in November, and the county board in November. So that's what I was understanding the process to be. I think, based on what you've discussed here, I think that was certainly within the intention of what the Human Services Board discussed. I don't think it's against that. I was just following what you said we were supposed to.
Nope, there was a little bit of a change in the conversation here, so.
Am I the Mr. Severson you were talking
Yes.
about? Okay, then I know kind of what the loop
Rick
is.
said that you two had talked, and that was recommended.
Can you repeat the loop, so, because it's a little
Jerry
different.
wanted to make a
I
comment.
guess I'm confused on.
So much.
Bottom line, you're getting paid
Okay,
from the county.
okay.
The Human Services Board didn't want to pay it out of Human Services. They said send it back to exec finance and let them take, it wasn't that they didn't want to pay, they just felt it shouldn't come out of Human Services Fund, so that was the only issue at hand.
But the Human
You
Services,
can listen to the Human Services Board meeting, it's all session.
Yeah, I do.
is the Human Services Board sponsoring the resolution to remove the money from the general fund?
That's what I was told.
That's what's happening.
That was a discussion that did occur.
And then it's once you've started a resolution, then we just follow through with the regular
So
progression.
that'll just delay it a month, but
The agenda hasn't been posted yet, so we can take that off if you want.
No, I don't think we want to take it off. We just want to know what's happening.
It would speed it up if we just take it off their agenda and just send it from our past deal right to county board.
All right.
we all agree with that no motion or action, anything here. We've agreed to pay it. We are just going to send this to county board to pay.
Yeah, that's,
So, yeah, you can take it off the agenda then.
take it off their agenda, and then, Paul, you can put it on the,
You're going to write the resolution,
Yep, and I'll work with you on
the wording?
wording for them.
So it'll go to the board this month, October.
yep. mhm.
Okay.
And no more coming back to us at all?
No more of this stuff.
Okay, sounds good then.
And
Okay.
who's going to sponsor the resolution then?
That'd be exec
This
finance.
committee, because they'll sign it.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
They already acted on it at the previous. meeting.
Yeah, action from our previous meeting.
Perfect.
For the record, staff didn't have any issue with paying the bill when we brought it to the Human Services Board. It was the board members that wanted to kick it back, so that was not a staff recommendation. I just want to be real clear on that.
Okay. Okay, good with that? Now, do we want to take care of Ann, or Paul, you want to go next?
Well, like I said, mine's going to be fast.
Okay.
First
Okay,
day
yep,
back.
well, you're good then, so.
Okay.
Okay,
Did
go
you
ahead.
walk in? Oh, yeah.
I was just going to tell,
You're so eager, Paul. You need a 2-week rest.
Okay.
Once in a while.
Yeah.
You're so
I had
gung-ho.
2
I
weeks,
just so impressed.
2 weeks to do this report, and I haven't done it, no. The only thing that I was going to mention in my report was that being gone for 2 weeks, the office still ran. I was happy of that. Ann and I were in phone contact quite a bit in the last 2 weeks. The tentative redistricting plan is sent off to all the municipalities, and they have until the 15th of October to accept. Some can go on the WISE LR and do their own acceptance. Others that don't have that capability, we'll have to help them with. I'll talk to you later on that one. And that's all I really have.
okay, any questions for Paul? Okay, you're up, Ann.
All right.
Thanks, Ann.
Yep.
Oh, this print is too small, Ann.
Good thing I didn't make it then.
I'll remember that for next
Okay,
time.
yeah, what is it, about 25? I mean,
That's
holy
8 fonts.
cow.
8?
8?
Yeah. So, as you guys know, Tess is back, and we are full staff, and she's being trained in. She was a really great help with the redistricting. We're still training her. She'll be maintaining a lot of the GIS and online applications. Well points, well tests, survey maps are just a few of the things. And redistricting, we worked on the block lines before we all met together and created the districts. Then we assisted with the district creation, and then just the last week, we created and emailed maps to each municipality. We're answering a lot of questions from those municipalities. We're assisting them any way we possibly can, and we're also getting a lot of questions from the public and map requests too. So that's been keeping us busy even after we're done with that initial boundary creation. I'm working on a 3-year land information plan that's required by the state, and any projects we put in there, we can apply grant money to those projects. We had a land information council meeting to see a presentation on an upcoming LiDAR project that will be put in our plan. We are attending a regional GIS users group meeting this Friday in Viroqua with other counties to see what projects they're working on, and we try to assist each other in troubleshooting projects. Internally, I am creating a project documentation for the day I don't show up because of COVID and people need to keep on working. And also some department expectations, so everyone's on the same page as far as what I expect from them.
And I've got a question, Chuck, before.
Go ahead, Tim.
Before you move
Yeah.
on. I didn't jump in fast enough. The question has to do with the redistricting aspect that you covered first. You mentioned that you're getting a lot of questions from the public. Is there some way of accumulating, collating, somehow sharing those questions, not necessarily your answers, but sharing that public feedback? Because I haven't been getting any calls. I have not got a single call. And I also learned that the public hearing that took place before the last board meeting was not televised.
Correct.
So essentially, nobody in the public heard the entire discussion that went on in the board for that 40 minutes before the meeting, leaving a lot of unanswered questions about what's going on
Yes.
in the county. So if there's some way, if some way you can report to this committee, this was the redistricting committee, report
Yep.
to this committee, what have you heard from people?
Well, mostly people want to know where there are any empty seats, where there's no current board member living. And that's really what they want to know, is the boundaries and where there's empty spots.
There are 3 districts, such districts,
I
correct?
think Tess actually counted 5.
5 districts with nobody?
Yeah.
I heard, okay, well, of course, now we got 3 different numbers. I heard 4, but 3, 4, 5, okay.
There's plenty, and that's the information they want, and they want to know where the boundaries are. So we have maps that we can email them, and that's the gist of the questions. It's not anything too complicated,
Yeah,
and
okay. I mean, I have heard that people who would never have considered being on the board before are now thinking about.
And that's good that they're taking an
Right.
interest in,
But especially if there are 3 or 4 or 5 areas that are not covered, that there are no, there's no board member sitting, well, that leaves, then that's wide open.
yeah. I think another good thing to do would be to get the tentative plan on our website so people can look at it there, and
That would dispel a lot of questions if you could put a map on the website.
right. Can we legally do that?
I think
wouldn't-
so, yeah. And will make sure, because like when we did the request for the WebEx for county board, that planning meeting was supposed to be televised too. So I'll make sure that the next public hearing, which will be again right before county board,
we'll have another one in
for
October
the
now?
final plan.
In October now?
No,
In
November.
Okay.
November.
Did you get any comments back from municipalities, if they were satisfied with the awards, or?
The only one I got was, were you Pigeon Falls? Was just one of the municipalities didn't have access to Whistler. So we'll have to help them. And they're a district that, or they're a municipality that has always been in one county board supervisor district and still is. So I mean, there shouldn't be any problem there anyway.
The city of Blair accepted their plan. They've already submitted. So,
About Arcadia?
not yet.
Who?
Arcadia?
A lot of
We're thinking
they have not
Arcadia
had
is going
time.
to okay it anyway because they were at our meeting and helped us draw the lines, so.
Yeah, and
Who was the other one that was a split municipality between, was Independence split?
Independence,
Was?
Gales.
And Galesville?
No, yes.
And
Yeah.
Galesville. So there are a couple of municipalities that should be getting back to us on whether or not they're okay with them.
And we offered to actually go to their offices if they need help with that Whistler program and help them with that. So we'll be out, hopefully we'll be out helping a lot of municipalities out. Any other questions as far as land records? Because I have a, the real property lister, Nick, gave me a report to pass on to you. And I just wanted to highlight a few things. He has been continuing to update property transfers and land divisions during the current week or the following week to assure our property records are as current as possible. He is working with the zoning staff as far as property divisions, violations. They've created a process to make sure that gets completed. He's been working with the assessment roles and municipal clerks for their open book border review. He has 2 of the 26 municipalities left. And he's starting to work on a lot of GIS projects for us too.
What does that mean, Ann? Work on adjusting the road center line?
So our newest aerial flight was 2020, and we noticed a lot of areas where the roads don't quite follow what you see on the aerial flight. So what we want to do is create we want to create a road layer, a network layer for the roads, but first we want to make sure that the roads look correct over the aerial image. And then what we'll do is we'll create a network and a routing layer from that roads layer. So we're going to have two different road layers in the future.
Will that affect the size of parcels and therefore the assessment of parcels that are adjacent to these roads?
No, the parcel mapping is the base map. We make sure that follows the roads, and usually there's a description of that road center line for the parcel map. And then the roads layer comes after that. We'd like them to be one and the same, but sometimes
They're not going to agree.
sometimes it's not. So this is going to be a busy time coming up for Nick. He is going to start starts the process on sending the municipal assessors all land divisions for them to split the current assessed value, so the buyer and seller will get a tax bill for the newly created parcels. And he is going to start meeting with school district administrators to discuss the school district boundaries, so we're all in agreement. And those go by the taxes. And he's going to work with city and village officials on quality control checks on property addresses, creating a process for those municipal clerks to send land records updated address information. And he also would like to get out and educate the importance of the 911 information from the municipalities. We're going to be working on, Nick is going to work with Tess on identifying farm owners with multiple homes and passing that information on to UW Extension so they can get working on well water sampling for those homes for bacteria and nitrates. And most importantly, Nick just got back from his annual conference. He is president-elect for 2022, so he'll be representing Trempealeau County as the president of the WRPLA Association. He's been serving on the board of directors, and he'll continue to serve as a representative of the Department of Revenue, State and Local Finance Committee. And that's all I have for Nick.
Any questions for Ann?
Any questions?
Good job. Thank you very much.
Yep, thank you.
You told us what you need to tell us, Paul, already, or?
Yeah.
Okay.
I chimed in on her a little bit with the redistricting. The only other thing that I would say is that we have to have the redistricting done at the November County Board because December 1st is when nomination papers go out for County Board supervisors. And we have to have that in the paper actually 2 weeks before because of the deadline for having it in the paper is the 23rd, which is a Tuesday, and our papers always come out Wednesday, so it has to be the week before, which means the week before that, I have to get it to the paper. And County Board is on the 9th, and I have to have it to the paper by the 12th, so it goes in that following week's paper,
You're talking about November or December?
December.
County
But
Board
we-
is the 9th in December, that's earlier?
November 9th is the day meeting for County Board. Yep. I think that's the date. I keep saying it's
Oh,
the
you say
9th.
for November or December?
November.
Oh, November, okay.
Yes, that's a day meeting.
Okay, anything else on that then? Okay, Mr. Niemer?
I don't have anything new on the county board rules. I'm not ready to have this committee approve them yet. The TV studio is kind of revamping, I think this committee recalls, some of the wording as to what they're going to be called moving forward, and so that's still going through their committee at the moment. So that has to be incorporated into the board rules yet. So my intent would be is to have the final version. I didn't make any more changes, so the final version would be at the November meeting for approval is what the intent would be, assuming there aren't any other changes that are being proposed.
Okay, thank you. ARPA funds, who's going to take the lead on that?
I did reach out after the last exec meeting to our auditors about the lost revenues, and they were going to get back to me with an agreement, and I checked my emails this morning, which had almost 400 of them in there, and I didn't find anything from them, so I sent them a fast email asking if they'd done any of that. And so that's one thing that we're still working on anyway for lost revenues. Other than that, the money is just sitting there. I had to do the first.
Paul, at 11 o'clock, WCA is having the training.
Yep,
on it.
yeah, I've been watching the clock on that,
So
because,
they're gonna have a cross-county do an example of how they did the lost revenues. I didn't know if you had a chance to get that email.
They
it's in there, but John told me about it this morning,
They
so.
also got Dale Knapp, who's probably the best in the whole United States at telling you how you can use these,
So anyway,
come up with your lost revenues.
I did the first report, which was due August 31st, and the second report now is due the end of October, so hopefully, and George not being here today, I think you made him the chair of that subcommittee on ARPA funds, so I don't know where he's at on that at all, but we'll have to prod him to get going on that part too.
And
But at
Paul,
least-
for your info.
Go ahead, Tim.
This did come up at one of the budget hearings last week, and you were not present at the budget hearing, so I did make the suggestion to George that there's a possibility that some of that ARPA money could be used for water quality improvement. And George, I said, I don't know, I don't have anything specific, but my wife attended every WTA webinar last week, 4.5 of them, and this was one of the discussions. And apparently, some towns are doing things such as putting bathrooms in the town halls under ARPA.
Under ARPA.
And under the, you know, I mean, you're extending the consequences of COVID as far as possible, but it would, you know, for sanitation or something like that. So I thought, well, there may be maybe there's some opportunity to use the money that way.
And another one of the big ones is broadband, of course,
Yeah,
too,
yeah.
so that one, but I haven't heard anything going on in that with Trempealeau County, which I suppose would be through the Sheriff's Department and IT? Yep, so.
I went to that breakout session on broadband, and there's, Vernon County's doing it, Trumbull County, or WTCO, or whatever you call it, is doing it. They do some cooperative things.
Oh,
where you
our
can you know,
Tri-County Communications, TCC.
I didn't realize the cost, but like fiber optic, they can run $30-some thousand a mile just to run it. It's not cheap.
Okay, any other questions on the ARPA funds? Kind of a similar thing for FEMA or
The
not?
other thing with ARPA funds is if, we mentioned at the county board meeting that there was,
What did you say you did there?
yeah, kind of gimpy.
So we mentioned at the county board meeting that the FEMA first submission didn't cover everything, including things like computers and other devices, the cleaning machines that could be used after the COVID crisis is over. Paul's going to work with Integrity to resubmit it. In the event that some of those things are not covered by FEMA, we would come back and ask that ARPA covers those, just so you know that there could be, and that's about, how much money is that?
$335,000, I think it was.
That's the first submission, and then you've got some other ones coming up. So I just want to make sure that you kind of earmark that a little bit too, so.
Okay, thank you.
The one that I really am confused about not being covered was contact, two of the nurses that Health Department contracted with to do contact tracing were rejected. It just, that one doesn't make sense, so.
Okay, you got FEMA then too, Paul?
That was what we were just talking now.
Okay, so FEMA's taken care of too?
Yep.
Okay, then the county board update, budget update, and I can update that a little bit. We've had, what, 4 or 5 meetings, and except for highway, it has come back very positive. Several departments have asked for less money, which has been very good.
Unfortunately, it isn't
I don't know
gonna
if
be
there's
that way.
anything else anybody wants to add to that. I think that's been the general tone. We've been very happy with, we talk as we got one coming up that's up
Not gonna be-
substantially.
Not gonna be fun.
Probably a couple of ones that are coming up that are.
So far, that's where we're at. We haven't heard.
So far,
Right.
that's where we're at.
And I guess if you want an update on levy limit, we're still over 2 million over what we can be for levy limit. So there's got to be two, and that's not counting the highway stuff that they were talking about, the bonding and all that. But we've got $2 million to cut out of that budget.
We're talking about just operating expenses.
Operating expenses, because we're way too high.
Does that include the compensation study?
That 50,000? No, oh, wait, no.
The adjustment.
No, I think, did Krista come to your meeting? Did Human Resources already come to budget hearings? They did?
I-
And we're gonna be okay on the health insurance increase because of the savings we had last year. But anything that you do with the wage study is gonna add more to the levy, which means we're gonna be even higher in cutting. But it's over $2 million that we have to cut from the budget, for sure. And I don't know where it's gonna come from, so that's gonna be a big discussion.
Okay, anything else, any other questions or comments about the budget? Okay, then moving to set our next meeting. The 1st of November is a Monday. Is that when we want to go?
We have to, because the very next day is when I'd have to send out the.
Okay, so October 1st.
Any action items.
Yep.
At what time?
What time do you want to go?
8:30 is fine with me.
8:30 is fine?
8:30 is fine.
Yep, okay, 8:30.
Got it.
Okay, anything else? Okay, thank you all, and we'll adjourn then at 9:55.